Chapter 1 Freedom April 28th, 1998. Lying is not always wrong, John Ross. It's only wrong when someone stands to get hurt. I was finally free. My dragon's bane katana banged rhythmically against my bow and quiver of arrows as I walked. I left the life I knew behind me, and I headed towards a new life in a new city with new possibilities. The life I lived in Meaton faded in the distance as I walked toward a life of glory in the Supremacy War. My mother told me pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. I'm not sure where she got that idea, but I agree with her. Looking back, I haven't lived what some might call an entirely blessed life, but my blessings and curses tend to balance each other out. My curses consisted of constant torment from bullies in Meaton. My blessings consisted of the love of my mother, my uncles, and my cousins. My first love, Diana, betrayed me, but there was a nameless, ever-present guardian who would be there when I fell. Nightmares made my sleep restless, but in the waking world I felt no fear. I walked half the day and half the way between Meaton and Bellotto where my uncles lived. I intended to rendezvous with them. They would show me around the city, and I would begin my training to join the human army at Fort Kingsley. Bellotto hosted one of the most highly fortified settlements in the New World. Every house concealed a door leading to the underground caverns for citizens to escape dragon attacks. However, by my birth, dragons knew which cities to stay away from if they valued their scales. Times were different in the year 1998 than in the 1950s and 60s. Dragon's Bane alloy was developed in the 1970s, and humans learned to use it effectively. The early genocidal attacks of New York City, London, Tokyo, Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles left the human race beaten but not defeated. Cries of "Remember Marcinelle" elicited forth from human lips as often as the dragons breathed fire, rained boiling water, spewed ice, or blew smoke with molten rocks. August 8th, 1956, in Marcinelle, Belgium, the day the dragons returned to this world. Any dragon bones found were attributed to dinosaurs. Hundreds of years passed. The dragons became an animal of myth. There were 262 casualties in Marcinelle that day. Reports said, coal mine fire. Lying is not always wrong, John Ross. Reports of flying creatures laying waste to small towns grew, and exactly 2 months later, New York City was destroyed. My grandfather, John Ross Gerstung, was one of the first humans to witness the aftermath of New York. Most of the human leaders of the time perished. He'd heard stories of dragons, but hadn't believed it until he saw for himself what they could do. My grandfather became the first human to kill a dragon. He did so before Dragon's Bane was developed, even before the 27 Guild came into being. He waged legendary battles with Jonathan the Tyrant. My mother named me after him to honor the sacrifices he made for the human race. My grandfather trained many great warriors and put together the Hellbringers, the elite of the human army. My grandfather trained arguably the most famous fighter of the human army, Lieutenant Plato Kingsley, and the current general, William Braggs. My uncles, Oliver, Maxwell, and Zachary, were among Kingsley's students. I wanted to do my grandfather's memory proud, and do my part to free the human race from the terror of the dragons. But first I had to deal with one last problem of my own. Strike! My constant tormentors, Todd Bolin and his brothers, Don, Mike, and Craig. I guess they saw fit to see me on my way. I'm surprised they followed me so far out of Meaton. They must have really wanted to wish me well. I turned to face them. They all rode horses. I smiled grimly as they surrounded me and rode around me. They smiled back, and their eyes gleamed in a way I did not recognize. "We're here to make sure you never come back to Meaton, bastard," Todd said. Bastard. The name the villagers called me for as long as I could remember. 17 years ago, a drunken lout raped my mother and I was conceived. I guess technically I was a bastard, but that shouldn't have been my fault, nor the fault of my mother. It's only wrong when someone stands to get hurt. I hadn't planned on coming back right away, Todd, I replied. Todd and his brothers dismounted and pulled their horses to a tree and tied them up. I guess there's no reasoning with you. You are bent on running me off, but good, huh? I said as I removed my sword, my bag, my bow, and quiver. Craig Boland was the oldest. He trained in the human army and was 4 years older than Todd. He came back on leave from training before being deployed for service. The twins, Don and Mike, were 2 years older than Todd and about to leave for war themselves. Todd was a few months older than me. To the average onlooker, this fight was not in my favor. "We're here to make sure you never bother the village again," Todd said. All 4 boys were built like strong, working villagers. Fortunately for me, Todd, Don, and Mike were also mostly untrained. Craig was my primary worry. The boys circled me, pounding their fists into their hands. I stood with my feet shoulder-width apart, my hands at my sides, open but ready. My uncles trained me every summer since age 5. My muscles relaxed, ready to act and react. The 20-mile walk had not fatigued me. Spring heat dripped sweat down my face. I thought of my grandfather and the stories I heard of his battles with Jonathan the Tyrant. I wondered if his heart raced like mine when he fought his nemesis. Craig attacked with a punch from behind. I twisted my body down and to the left, firing a straight right punch into Don's gut. I shifted my weight back to my right leg and pushed off with my left, hitting Mike with a straight left in his gut to match. Todd came down with a right hammer fist. I blocked with my left forearm and shot up with a right uppercut to his chin. I swung a right roundhouse kick and clobbered Craig in the left side of his face. Don came at me clumsily with a haymaker that I blocked, then fired off another right to his nose. Mike received a similar send-off. Both collapsed, holding their bleeding noses. Craig staggered back towards me, grabbing my brown leather tunic in both of his hands. I reached up under his arms to clinch his head with my hands. I yanked him down by his head and threw a couple knees to his stomach. I pushed him back and kicked him hard in the chest. He flew backwards into the nervous hooves of the horses. They whinnied in fright, but didn't stomp on him. Todd came at me from the back. His right arm wrapped under my chin, and he locked the hold with his left arm at the back of my head. I grunted and turned inward to free my airway. I hit him with my left elbow hard enough to make him loosen his hold, then wrapped my left arm around his body. I lifted Todd up and put his shoulders down hard on the ground with a Gerstung slam that my uncles would have been proud of. All 4 boys lay in various states of pain and defeat. I looked at them each and shook my head. No one is going to keep me from coming back. As long as my mother lives in Meaton, I will return. Make sure everyone in the village knows that if my mother is harmed in any way, there is no power in the world that will stop me getting my revenge. Is that clear? I waited, and all 4 boys said a quiet yes. I put my bag over my shoulder, then my quiver and bow. I strapped my katana back around my waist and walked towards the horses. Craig scuttled out of the way on the ground. I untied the horses one by one and drew my katana. I slapped the horses all hard on their rears, and they took off into the forest. My last words to the Boland brothers. You'd better get home fast. I heard there are packs of ferals roaming around the area. They won't hesitate in taking down 4 unarmed boys. Good luck. I turned my back to the Boland brothers and Meaton. I turned toward Belato and my impending future. I was finally free.
Okay.